What is going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to the inaugural episode of Haul Across the Country, the podcast. I am your host and the founder of Haul Across the Country, Joe Hall. Just giving you guys a little bit of background on who we are. We are a 501c3 nonprofit founded and headquartered here in Ohio. Our goal is advocacy for mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And we hope to do that through a 48 state, 48 capital walk across the country, in which we hope to talk to legislators along the way to see what they're doing to help with mental health for their constituents. We also hope to speak with mental health providers along the way, try to get some insight for people who may be going through some things on their own. And lastly, we hope to bring people on and share their stories, their successes, their struggles, everything. Help people open up and talk about the things they're going through because I really believe that one, that can help you start to heal, but it can also inspire others to start attacking their mental health. And a little bit later on tonight, I have got a very special guest, very good friend of mine, a local guy here in Dayton. If you uh, know the music scene in Dayton, you definitely know my guest. So you're going to want to hang around. We're going to have a really good discussion about his mental health battle. Um, but before we get there, I know there's going to be a few people that are tuning in for the first time. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background about myself and Haul Across the Country so you know where we've been in order to know where we're planning to go. Haul Across the Country was truly founded in 2022. Um, that was when I began my first walk across the country for mental health awareness and suicide prevention. I started in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware on May 15th, and I finished in San Francisco at Ocean Beach on my 40th birthday, November 22nd. It took me 192 days. It was one of the most rewarding experiences that I've ever had in my life. I encountered so many wonderful people along the way. I shared stories with a lot of people who had been through their own struggles or had loved ones that went through their own struggles. And we also raised about $4,500 for a friend of mine who had lost her son to suicide in 2020. They began a fundraiser for behavioral health at Children's Hospital here in Dayton, Ohio, and a business group told them, if you guys get to $50,000 within a 5-year period, we will match it with 50,000. And at the time I left, my goal was to get them 11,000. We didn't quite get there. Got to, like I said, we got 4,500. But in the spring of 2023, they were able to get over the 50,000 mark. I believe they got to about 65,000. So combined with the donation from the business group here in Dayton, we helped raise $115,000 for behavioral health at Children's Hospital, which is fantastic. Um, but along the walk, it opened my eyes to a lot of things as far as kind of how widespread the mental health battle or struggle is for people in this country. I mean, it really seemed to not really spare anybody. There were rich people who had talked to me about relatives that were struggling. There were, you know, not rich folks that had stopped and talked to me, people that were at my income level, everywhere in between. This is things everywhere. People are struggling. And, I got messages on Facebook that, people said, oh, this is inspiring. I appreciate what you're doing. And, that kind of stuff carried me a long way, but it opened my eyes to the bigger problem is like, how do we fix this? How do we get more help to people? How do we get more hope to people? And a little bit about me, my personal struggle with mental health. And it's one thing that I was fairly open with during the initial walk because I felt that if I'm going to ask you to, be open with your mental health and share it, I've got to be able to do that myself. I have been diagnosed as depressed, major depressive disorder for going on 17 or 18 years now. So roughly half of my adult life. Um, Growing up, I dealt with a lot of self-esteem issues that have kind of snowballed And when you combine that with, anxiety and the depression, and it was something that I never really corrected, because years ago when I was diagnosed, I was one of those people that had that mindset of, I'm not going to take drugs. Who needs to take drugs? Like, you're just sad, get over it, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, all of that kind of snowballed and snowballed. And in 2020, I attempted suicide twice. In 2020, in a 3-month span, I managed to lose a job that I actually really enjoyed and I put a lot of effort into. Uh, the same day that I was given my walking papers from that job, I had found out that I tore one of my biceps. And it was actually my second bicep tear. And then 3 months later, I was involved in a motorcycle accident. Um, I was heading to EMT class at Sinclair Community College and wasn't paying attention to the traffic in front of me. And I went through the back window of an SUV. I ended up fracturing my pelvis in 2 places. I broke and dislocated my wrist, fractured my orbital bone, and I had about 50 to 60 stitches in my face and head. Um, and those first 2 nights in the hospital, despite being, having my right arm casted up and everything, I was trying to hang myself in the hospital bed. And, the second day when I woke up, the day after the accident, they did the surgery where they put a plate in the front of my pelvis and a screw in the back of my pelvis. I've got a plate and screws in my right wrist. Um, you know, that day and the night before, when I was just laying in the bed by myself, because it was obvious it was COVID. Nobody could be in the room that late. It was just me by myself in a tremendous amount of pain. I was done with life. I did not want to be here anymore. And I had had suicidal thoughts for a long time. And one thing that always kept me from attempting anything was I have this issue where I worry about what people think. I've let people dictate, the jobs I've taken, decisions and conversations where we'll be talking about something or discussing something. And because I don't want somebody to think less of me, I'll just kind of agree with them. But I went through all of that, and I just, I was lost for a long time, and I would never tell anybody that I was thinking about killing myself, because if I actually committed suicide, that would impact other people. I had to think of a way to try to kill myself that would not be obvious, not be, something that people would walk in and be like, oh, what could we have done? What could we have, could we have helped it? Could we have stopped it? It was always one of the things that where I didn't want to be alive anymore, but I didn't want to inconvenience anyone else after the fact any more than being gone would have inconvenienced them. So there were so many times where I would be at work or be doing something and would pray for a car to go left to center and just clean me out, just be done with it. That way, nobody has to wonder what could we have done or anything like that. It would have been a clean end to everything. And, that all came to the point after the motorcycle accident. I felt I was at my lowest, absolute lowest. Thankfully, obviously, I did not succeed because I'm here. But for me, from the accident, my lower body was as close to being paralyzed for the first few days as I could be without actually being paralyzed. I had nerve damage. My legs had swelled up. I couldn't really move them because of all the trauma. So the third day, I have my accident. Second day, they do the surgery. Third day, they bring an occupational therapist. They want to get me up to get me walking, which is pretty normal with, things like that. Like they get you up with hip replacements the next day. Sometimes I think later in the same day. So the therapists come in and I'm laying in the bed and they grab my legs because I could not move my legs to put them on the floor. They had brought in a special walker, which had a platform that my wrist could set on because this, my hand was broken, so I couldn't push myself up. They bring this walker in And they're like, okay, let's get your legs on the floor and we'll get you stood up. I couldn't even move my legs to turn them to get onto the floor. So they picked my legs up, and the nerve damage, the temporary nerve damage that I had in my legs was so bad. When my legs would touch together, it felt like you would set me on fire. It was probably as bad as any of the pain that I had been experiencing from the accident. It was bad. So they get my legs off to the side of the bed, and I get my feet on the ground, and I'm in tears, I'm bawling. And they're just like, okay, that's good, that's fine. We got your feet on the ground. It's a good start. And I said, no, you brought the walker in here. I'm at least going to stand up. So they bring it over to me. And what was probably the most comical part of all of this is I've got two occupational therapists, one on my left, one on my right, and they put a lifting strap around me. And I'm a big dude. Right now I'm probably 375, 380. At the time, probably 350. I weighed as much as both of these women combined, plus quite a bit. So I'm like, look, if I start falling, you two aren't going to catch me. But at least they tried. So we get up and I stand up, and it was kind of like going over a finish line almost. I was like, man, I stood up, I did this. And my dad was there, and he took a couple of pictures, and it was kind of cool to have him sitting in the room when that happened. So we didn't do any walking that day. I was significantly spent from just simply standing up. So they get me back into the bed, and I'm laying there, and I say, I got to do something in my head. I got to do something to keep myself away from thinking about hurting myself and those types of thoughts. I've got to keep myself away from that as much as I can. So I'm sitting there and I'm kind of like spitballing in my head. And I said, you know what? I'm going to run a marathon. I said, next year in 21, I'm going to run a marathon. And a lot of people were like, you're insane. Well, October of 2021 rolls around, and I had entered into the Columbus Marathon, the nationwide children's hospital marathon. I managed to finish in about 7 hours and 15 minutes. I was dead last, and it was an incredibly painful experience, but I finished. They were cleaning up the finish line when I got there. I didn't even get any snacks after the race, which, if you know me, made me very sad. But I finished this marathon. The lady's like, well, let me go see if I can find you some food. And I'm standing next to a railing with my little baby deer legs. I can barely stand up. There's no food. And I tell her, I'm like, just get me my finisher medal. That's all I want. I finished. So I get to my car, and I get back to work that, a couple days later on Monday. And I'm like, I felt unfulfilled, or I felt like there was something else out there to do. So 5 weeks after the marathon, I fly to Arizona, and I compete in an ultra marathon. For anybody out there that doesn't understand, an ultra marathon is any distance over 26.2 miles. This marathon in particular was a 48-hour race. You just run, walk, move around a track as many times as you can in 48 hours. So in an effort to motivate myself to try to do a little bit more, I kind of started a fundraiser. I asked people to donate. My goal was like, hey, people donate $1 per mile or X amount per mile. So I was like, man, I've got this incentive to keep going. And my goal was to raise money for Children's Hospital here in Dayton to get toys for Christmas, because this was right around my birthday near the end of November. I get out there, and within the first, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 hours, my feet are completely blistered up. My toes are blistered. And in hindsight, I look back at it like I didn't have the right socks, didn't have the right shoes. I had no idea what I was doing, but I kind of kept pushing, and I think I covered 31.1 miles on the first day. And as the second day wore on, and I could barely walk because of all the blisters on my feet, I sat down with a couple people that, had noticed my ridiculous perseverance at this point. And I talked about what they do for their blisters, whatever. So I get them somewhat taken care of. And later on, I remember talking to my cousin as I was going, and I found out that one of the guys in the 48-hour race actually dropped out. Because you just ran as much as you wanted. So if you wanted to stop after 10 hours of a 48-hour race, you did. Well, somebody stopped at 51 miles and some change. And I was looking at my mileage because every time you'd come around, there's a screen that'll tell you, how many miles you run. And I looked at it and I'm doing the math in my head and I said, I can beat one person in this thing. Like, I don't care if he stopped, I can beat one person. So that was the new goal, was to like space out the torture from, I don't know, this was probably like 2 or 3 a.m., middle of the desert. And it's like, space out my torture and all my pain to try to beat this one person and get to 52.2 miles. I think that's what I ended up with, was 52.2. And it was, time was running down. And there's probably about a half hour to an hour left in the race. And I saw the ticker go up and I said, I got one more lap. And I jogged the whole lap, but would be very liberal with use of the word jog. But I finished the lap. As soon as I crossed the timing mat, I turned right, went straight to my tent, started packing up all my stuff, grabbed some clothes, went and showered. The really cool thing about it was that the running community is really awesome. Everybody there, one person had asked about my story, why I was there, the motorcycle wreck, all that. And it spread around and like everybody was super pumped for me. We get a little trophy just for finishing. And I was mad because I had set a goal to run 100 miles over 2 days, not realizing how difficult that actually is. I just went to my head and I'm like, well, if I could do 26.2 miles in 7 hours, then doing 100 miles in 48 hours is easy, right? It wasn't easy. But everybody was like, you don't know how many people would have quit after that first day or after 10 hours with your feet being as bad as they were. Like, you kept showing up, you kept going. That's what we support. That's what's awesome. So I get home, I get the funds collected. I think we had raised $2,200 for children's for toys and everything, which was cool. But I get done with that and we get back to work, kind of same thing. Takes me 3 or 4 days before my legs are like completely back. And I start feeling my mental health, dipping again. Not really enjoying the management at the place I was working at. I'd actually gone back to my previous employer, the one that had let me go. But I'm just doing the entry level work, which was usually fine with me. I didn't have to deal with the stress of being a manager. I could just go in, do my work, go home. But the way that some of the things were being done, it wasn't really working for me. And I knew it affected other people, but for me, it was a thing where I was like, I don't want to deal with this. Like, I don't want to stay in this environment. I like the people, some of the people, but I don't want to stay in this environment if it's not good for me. And I was at home just kind of flipping through YouTube one day because I work third shift, so my days are my nights. But I'm, going through YouTube just trying to find things to watch to put myself to sleep. And I come across a music video called "Live Before I Die" by Mike Posner, and it, gave some highlights and whatnot of his own walk across the country in 2019 that he did after he lost his father to brain cancer and a friend of his in 2018. And at the end of it, actually, I think it was at the beginning, there's a text block that says, I walked across the country to become somebody I'm actually proud of. And that, combined with the title and then just listening to the lyrics, it really hit me. It was probably one of the most impactful songs of my life. And as soon as that song ended, I kind of sat here in silence and I go, I'm going to do it. I'm walking across the country. So that was, I want to say, about December of 21, mid to late December. I said, we're going to do this. And I believe it was February. My cousin and I were sitting around at his place, and he was the first person I told. And he was like, what? And he's like, this is awesome. I love it. So we're sitting there and I'm kind of like kicking around names. And because you want something that's obviously catching, something that like people will remember, because you want to draw eyes to it. You want people to pay attention, especially when you're walking for a cause. If this was just like me doing this just for me, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But early on, I had decided, and part of this was just because of the whole self-esteem issues that I've never worked through with a therapist in my life. But it was like I didn't look at myself as worthy enough for a walk across the country. Like, regardless of what good that I look back in hindsight that it did for me, before the walk, I didn't know it was going to be that beneficial. And I didn't know, I really didn't believe that the effort was worth it for Joe Hall. It just wasn't. So that was when, I kind of sat around and I started thinking of why? Why would you do this? Because it was something that a lot of people asked me, like, why would you walk across the country? And it kind of dawned on me again. I was sitting there thinking about it. I'm like, man, I'm doing this. I came up to this decision because I was struggling with my mental health again. So I'm going to walk and I'm going to talk to people and talk about mental health and talk about my story, share my struggles, my successes, because the fact that I wasn't able to finish what I tried to start in that hospital, that's a success story. I'm not ashamed to admit that I was trying to do it. I didn't tell a lot of people right away. If I had told anybody at the hospital, or if God forbid I had been able to cram myself up the bed enough to wrap a hose around my neck, I would have been locked down and strapped to the bed for the remainder of my stay in the hospital. But, that's a success story for me, and, not being able to finish this. But I wanted to be able to share that with people. And so I knew, I was like, okay, we're going to walk for mental health. And I reached out to my friend Sarah, and I knew that she had lost her son at 16, just shy of his 17th birthday, I believe, in 2020, to suicide. And it's one thing when someone, my age does that. Because, as adults, we may or may not have lived a life. It may not have been great. It may have been great. We don't, it may have been great to us, but what's going on in someone's head may not be great. So it's one thing when an adult does it, but when young people are doing it, when children are getting to this point, that is the even bigger red flag to me. And I had known that they had started a fund called Run a Mile for Jackson in his honor. And I asked her, I said, I asked for her permission. Can I do this walk in your name, in Jackson's name, and do it in honor of him and help raise some funds for you guys? And she and her mom, Jackson's grandmother, Karen, they were like, absolutely, let's do it. So that was when, Haul Across the Country really became a thing. And like I said, on May 15th, I left Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, with wet feet because I got way too close to the ocean water, and I began this walk. And throughout the walk, like I said earlier, I met a lot of people that were really amazing. I met firefighters that were intrigued by what I was going through. In Illinois, I talked to police officers and firefighters who had told me about how, their departments had started like these kind of interdepartmental counseling for people who maybe lose a friend in the line of duty. And I thought that was like a phenomenal thing to have. Like, that's really good. It was like kind of mind blowing to me. And apparently it's becoming or is already like a fairly common thing. But I love the idea, I came across another family who had lost a son just a few years earlier to suicide. I came across a mother whose son had aged out of children's hospital care in Wyoming and was having to drive 2 to 3 hours each way to Colorado to take her son to get treatment. And, you see things like that, and it sticks with you. And I finished that walk, and I was really kind of, as the walk went on, I was really nervous about coming back to the real world, to normal life. Like, what's life going to look like after you've done this? And I get done, and I kind of get back into the grind of things. I've got a new job at the time. I'm still in the same warehouse, but I'm working for the actual company that owns the warehouse. I'm not doing the contract work like before. It's way less physical. I really enjoyed the job. I enjoyed the people I work with. most of them I had known for 5 years or more from working for the other company. So it was a really good, smooth fit as far as sliding right in and being able to work with people. But my mental health again, like it kind of started to slide. I felt lost. I felt, like you've done this great thing and we've reached a lot of people. I, I think the Facebook page for us got up to about 1,800 people at its peak. And we've got 400 to 500 each on Instagram and TikTok that follow along. And it was like, and I wasn't really making a super active attempt to market it. It was just like mostly word of mouth. People see the shirt. This is our old shirt. We've got new ones for sale. I'll have a link at the end of the show. If anybody wants to buy one, they'll be on sale for a few more days. The store closes the day before I leave. But, have the shirts. It's got the website on the back of it. And, people could go to the website, get connected to our social medias, or I just talk to people when they ask what I'm doing. I say, hey, go to Facebook, look up Haul Across the Country. You can kind of see where we're going and follow along for the rest of the walk. And, but I was never like proactively, like really trying to like spam anything out there because I didn't want it to feel manufactured. I wanted this to be earnest. I wanted it to be really me, and so I'm stumbling around and I'm like, I get done and I wanted to continue this movement, but I had no idea where to go, what I was going to do. I wanted to start a nonprofit, and we had kicked around ideas. A friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine were, I'm bouncing ideas off people. Like at one point, I had thought about trying to fundraise to facilitate a mobile mental health clinic. But then, a lot of the logistics really came into play, and you'd almost have to have multiple vehicles in every state because most states have separate licensure requirements for, therapists and social workers or counselors and things like that. So you would have to have all of these in a state. You'd have to have multiple, depending on the size of the state. And, they sit in one spot for 2 weeks and they rotate. And then, so you could see this mobile mental health specialist, a couple of times every 2 months. It's an improvement if you're not seeing one at all, but it's definitely not optimal for a lot of people. And then, just the sheer fundraising aspect, because the one thing I will also share is that I am a terrible salesman. All the jobs I've had in my past that have had a sales aspect, my bosses have kind of like been slapping me across behind the back of the head. Like, what are you doing? You need to sell this or that. I'm like, I don't have any self-confidence. I don't like hearing no from people. So I don't even attempt to, sell them on anything. So, trying to pitch people on, force the brand down their throat, or try to pitch people to raise money for this ridiculous goal of having these RVs that could treat people. It didn't seem logistically possible. We can't really treat mental health like you can a traveling clinic. You can't put a Band-Aid on mental health. It's something that's got to be treated and treated and treated. And it's also something that the person being treated has to work towards, and I'm guilty of it myself. I've talked to therapists, and I've been to counseling, and most of the focus that we've talked about isn't really even on my depression. It's mostly on my self-esteem issues. And, they basically send you home with homework sometimes. And I would just not do it a lot of times. I would feel like it was like inconsequential. Like, what is this little exercise going to do to help me? Ignoring the fact that this is a licensed person that is saying, this is step 1 or step 2 of this long list of things that we're going to do to try to help you out. And I didn't see a value in it, so I didn't bother with it. And that would be essentially the same thing that could happen with a mobile mental health clinic. You might sit in a place for 2 weeks, and you might be able to see any specific client 2 or 3 times, depending on volume. But then you've got to spend 2 weeks in another part of the state, and then 2 weeks in another part, and 2 weeks in another part. You only get to see this person once every 2 months. So how much of that busy work could you really give someone to work on without having them bounce things back off a therapist and back and forth? So, when I really got to thinking about it, I said, this RV idea just won't work. It's not going to happen. And so last year in 2023, my dad kind of fell ill multiple times. And it got to the point where the hospital told us, you got one or two options. It's we bring hospice in and we keep you comfortable, or we kind of go this more aggressive route surgically, because he's got an issue with his esophagus where he can't swallow very much at all. So he was losing weight and he was getting infections because he was malnourished. And my mom and my sister and I were in the hospital room when they came in, and we explained it to him, and we all told him, like, hey, whichever way you choose, we're behind you, because he had multiple infections throughout the first walk that required hospitalization. The first time it happened was actually right around the time I came through Ohio on the walk, and he didn't even recognize me. It had gone so septic. It had gone to his brain. It was bad. It was scary. And he's bounced back from every infection. Now he has a feeding tube in place, and we're still struggling to put weight on him. But at that point in 2023, we told him the options, and he was in there when the doctors talked about it. And, the one doctor who was a little bit more crass than I would have liked, he goes, Mr. Hall, he's like, if you choose the hospice route, you have to understand that this will be the thing that ends your life. And, they leave, and the four of us are sitting there, and we asked Dad, and he was, at this point, he had come out of this particular infection, and he was communicating with us, and he goes, we tell him, we present his options, and he goes, well, I know I'm going to fight. And, I kind of remember the day. It was an April day. It was a beautiful day. I think it was like in the 60s. It was sunny. It was just a beautiful day. And he says that, and we're all leaving for the day. And I go up to give him a hug, and I tell him, I say, hey, Dad, I want you to know I have never been more proud of you than I am right now. And from that moment on, I got to the car, and I sat there, and I looked at the beautiful weather, and I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back out on the road, but we're going to do this with the nonprofit behind it. And we're going to do this on a bigger scale. So that was where our nonprofit began slowly inching towards being founded. And, it took some time, because there was a while there where I didn't really believe that I could make this happen as a nonprofit. I thought this is just going to be something that I would have to completely self-fund again, just like the first one. And it wouldn't function. But I got to talking with a couple of friends of mine, one in particular, Garrett, who did a lot of help with me on the first walk as far as contacting fire stations and things like that to get a place to sleep, try to keep it as safe as we could. And he was like, start the nonprofit, do it this way. So I got a board together, and now here we are, 5-6 days away from embarking on this insane 13,000 plus mile journey on foot. And I don't know where it's going to go. It's going to be an interesting journey, and we're going to keep track of everything with the interviews we have and the people we talk to through this podcast. I really have high hopes that I'm going to get a lot better with the production of it. But the idea is that it's not a high production or a high value production. This is a mobile podcast. This is going to be me on the road talking to people, sharing the stories. if this isn't the Joe Rogan experience, we're not going to have a lot of like great editing, or I don't have anybody that can look up facts. This is sharing information, sharing insight, hopefully sharing some laughs, and maybe sharing some funny videos and pictures that we have along the way as well. So give me a second. I'm going to check and see if Norm is ready, and I will bring on our guest. Finally got everything going here. I am privileged to bring on this gentleman. I have known him for years. He actually sold me my motorcycle that we talked about earlier. And I'm actually going to let him introduce himself, but this is Norm Lilly. Norm, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, brother. Look at you in that handsome face. Strongest beard game on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to trim it before we hit the road because I got to get a fresh start at the beginning and then see where we end up in 3 years or whenever this finishes. I'll probably look like I belong in ZZ Top at that point.
Hey, man, chicks dig it.
So, Norm, one thing with mental health, and obviously you understand that's something that I'm really huge on, and I know you are as well. One thing that, especially with your situation, is that a lot of people seem to discount the things you've been through as not necessarily a mental health thing. Give us a little bit about your story.
God, I mean, it's got so many levels, right? I mean, I feel like everybody's that way for sure. But yeah, God, man. I mean, I had a really kind of a rough upbringing as a kid. We were poor. I grew up in a trailer park. I was abused as a kid. And that was normal for me growing up. So I didn't know any better. Getting my brains beat out. I thought this was normal.
Right.
If you don't know what the real world's supposed to be like, you don't know what is bad or not supposed to be happening to you when the bad stuff is, if that's all you know, right?
Right.
So naturally rebelled a little bit as a teenager, but I got into drugs and alcohol, became an addict. And I actually next month on the 11th is 9 years sobriety for me, which is crazy that 9 years have gone by.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. But yeah, it's crazy how all of that can kind of play in together as you go. And a lot of times you're not even aware of it when it's happening. Like maybe you're upset about something on a certain day, or maybe something happens to you and you can it's pretty easy to play the pity and poor me card bullshit. And then you realize, like, wait a minute. Well, hopefully you do, that this is why I'm feeling this way, or this is why I'm going down this path. And it's because of all this turmoil or whatever happened to you years ago. And most of the time when you were little and you were a kid.
Right. Yep.
And it's just, I'm 40 years old now, man. And some of that stuff still comes up.
Right. And I actually touched on that kind of stuff a little bit earlier when I was kind of doing the solo portion. And, a lot of it is like childhood trauma and stuff that gets built up and it snowballs on you. And
volcano.
Right. And something that not a lot of people know. I mean, my close friends know because they were always out with me. But for most of my 20s, I was probably an alcoholic myself. My dad is an alcoholic. He has been sober for a little over a year now, which is awesome. Most of it's medical related, obviously, with everything he's been through, but I'm going to take whatever we can get when it comes to that.
Win's a win, bro.
Exactly. And for me, it wasn't like I didn't have to come home and drink to get by. But like every weekend when like work was over and me and the boys are going out, it was either blackout drunk or I didn't go out, because that was the only way. That was the only way I could deal with. And like I touched on earlier, most of my stuff is like self-confidence, self-esteem related. I wasn't abused, but for whatever reason, and me and a therapist should probably hash this out at some point. I never worked through it. So the way I dealt with my inadequacy, my anxiety about going out and trying to meet people was like, just get completely hammered. And then if that really pretty girl across the way, shoots you down, it's cool. I was just drunk, And
You
for
medicate.
me, exactly, self-medicating. And for me, I know I kind of had my, what mother loves to call my come to Jesus meeting about 11 years ago when I was having like issues with an ex, and I was working as a bouncer at a bar, and it was like a rift. So what I did while I was working the door is get drunk. And then I got into a car accident. I hit a parked car driving home, and it cost me an Impala that I had made one payment on, and
Oh, man.
it cost me my job at the time. It cost me that relationship. But now, like, I can go out to a bar and I don't even want to drink anymore. Like, it was one of those things where, like, that was my rock bottom when it came to alcohol, was I hit that. And I'm like, I don't even have that desire to go out and like drink anymore. I might have a cider or two when I'm out with my buddies, but like that whole, like, go out and just get hammered just it's not even my vocabulary. Plus, I don't even know how I could handle a hangover at this age. I
I
don't
know, right?
did you have like a kind of that low point wake up call, that kind of like, or that one moment that maybe kind of like slapped you across the face and said it's time to make a change?
As far as like my abuse goes, like alcohol and drug abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it vividly. I was at a concert.
Who were you seeing?
And I was. It was actually the anniversary show at a concert venue that used to be in Dayton called Odd Bodies, and it was their anniversary show. And Finger 11 was playing, and I was real good friends with the owners and still am. I love those guys, and go down and hang out with them. So they're like, Norm, you coming out tomorrow? I'm like, hell yeah, I'll come out, and I'm watching the show, and Finger 11's playing, and I get there about time to get on stage, and I'm just so hungover from the night before. So what do? You start drinking again. And I got a beer, and I'm drinking. I'll never forget drinking it. And it's just every sip. The best way I can describe, said this 1,000 times. Every sip is going down just like a box of tacks. It's just brutal. And I get about halfway through it, and I have no idea why, but about 12 years, just did one of those. And I'm like, I've wasted so much time and made so many mistakes, and I've hurt so many people and myself. And I mean, and all this information and all this vision and all this happens in, a nanosecond. It's just real quick. And I just look at this beer and I go, and I fall apart in a bar, like crocodile tears down my face. And I go, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore. And I took the beer and I threw it in the trash, and I haven't touched anything since. And that was 9:32 p.m., June 11th, 2015.
Man, that is awesome. So,
if I'd have known now if I'd have known then what I know now, I wouldn't have done that. I could have killed myself. Being as hard, like, I didn't know till years later that, alcohol withdrawal is the only withdrawal that can kill you.
yeah.
I didn't know that. And I mean, I was a really, really, a lot of people talk shit about, like, man, I can drink, blah, 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 blah. I had 7,400 beers. I'm Andre the Giant. You know what I mean? I say that stuff now, and like then it was like you're always bragging, right? And I have a hard time talking about how much I drink now. It's almost embarrassing. Like,
right.
Really, dude? Like, that's what you drink? Like, it's bad. But I mean, it's the truth, and it sucks that it was that bad. But yeah, quitting cold turkey like that was, luckily nothing happened to me. Thank God, but it could have.
Right. Did you have like any of your friends that did they kind of come down on you for that? Did you have any of those type of friends that were like, come on, man, you don't have a problem. Like, let's go out and let's still party a little bit. Did you have anybody like
No,
that?
yeah, you always have people that you think are your friends, and they're not.
Right,
Uh, you're just bar buddies and your bar acquaintances, and then you'll realize like, what's your relationship with these people or this person?
right,
Um, and the relationship is you drink or you do drugs together. That's your relationship. You have nothing else. Nothing. We don't play video games. We don't go fishing. We don't go hunting. Whatever the hell it is. Nothing. What do? We get shit faced. That's what we do.
right,
You know what I mean? So, those people, and when that happens to you and you realize, like, you know, I, I thought for me, like this Mr. Local Celebrity guy, like I thought I had like, Dayton by the balls and everybody's my friend. And I'm like, 99.9% of these people could give two shits if I died tomorrow.
right. That
You know, they'd be like, oh man, Norm died? That sucks. You want a shot? Like
right,
that would be, you know what I mean?
right, yeah. Or
Now,
let's
granted,
do a
obviously,
shot in
there's
his
a ton of
memory.
people too that what I think would give a shit if something
Right,
happened to me, but that became very obvious very quick that's what that was, and that took a while to swallow. Like, you don't have a lot of friends. You got a lot
right,
of acquaintances and people who know your name, but how many
exactly.
friends do you have? How many brothers?
Right. Like
So
how many of those people could you call at a moment's notice and they would be there for you?
I found that out for my own. Uh, you never want to. You kind of think about that, like who would be there, right?
Right.
Uh, but I found that out for sure when the tornado happened in 2019. I hate to say that, make the joke of like the country song, like you find out who your friends are, but I did. And the people who I thought would be there never even sent me a message. And some people that I figure would be there were, but there was a ton that what? Like
Right.
I still can't believe and came to help. And I was like, wow. And that opened my eyes a lot too.
So did you do it? Did you go through AA or NA or anything, or did you just kind
Yeah,
of
man. And this is where like, I mean, you see me on social media, man. Like I do my best to not be preachy, and shove it down people's throats. Man, if you can handle it, have one for me, bro. Um, I can't. Like, I can't. If I have one, it ain't gonna be. It's not gonna be good.
it's going to be 20 or 30 and then
Yeah, there, and it's not enough.
right.
There is no. I can't have one. I can't have. Hey, let's go have a beer after work. I can't do that. I'm gonna drink everything and snort a bunch of cocaine and bang somebody's wife and probably end up in jail and get my ass beat. Like that's probably that's probably how this is gonna work out. I got enough problems all by myself. I don't need
Right.
help getting there. Um, the AA. I tell everybody this. Everybody's journey is going to be different. Just like your mental health stuff is. Nobody. We might have the same feeling. Of sadness, depression. But how we got there is different.
Yep.
Can it be similar? Absolutely. Loss, heartache, things like that, that are definitely the same thing. But how'd you get there? It could be completely different, man.
Right.
There's no, and it's achieving and maintaining sobriety. There's no difference in that. How I got there, and I tell everybody this. Don't do it the way I did it because it's got one of the biggest fail rates there is. And that's one of those where I'm like, thank God that I haven't fallen down, and I've stayed on the path. AA does wonders, man, for a lot of people. Like, and I went to a couple. For me, it's not for me. I'm not a very religious person. My view on it was, and I'm not knocking you if you are. If you are, great, man, good for you. Like,
Right.
God bless you. And I got nothing against that. For me, my thought process was nobody put this monkey on my back but me. Nobody made me drink that. Nobody made me smoke that or snort that or whatever, right? I made a decision. Well, let's try this. And I lost the ability to control that because I'm an addict. That's what I do.
Right.
I do shit to excess all the time. And I'm still dealing with it now. Like when I got sober, I was about 240 pounds. I smoked. I kicked booze and drugs and shit, and then I got I quit smoking in October, and I'm just trading one for the other. Now my addiction's food, and I'm 350 pounds. I'm freaking huge. So I'm trying to go in the right direction, and that's my next mission. So everybody's way to get there and achieve it and maintain it is just a different way. If AA works for you, man, hell yeah, go do it. For me, it wasn't for me, and it's just because it's kind of based in religion a little bit.
Yeah.
The Serenity Prayer and things like that. 12 steps. That wasn't. I felt like big man upstairs ain't got nothing to do with this. This is a one-on-one for me. Like this is Norm versus Norm, and that's how I treated it.
Would you be in the boat then? Do you think that addiction is a personal choice or is a choice, or do you believe addiction is as a disease to be a mental health thing? Because this is one thing that you get people on both
All the
sides of the
time.
Fence, and I'd
All
like to
the
hear, because
time.
I got my views, but you being the guest, I'm going to
Yeah.
allow you to give yours first.
You made the choice to have the addiction. Like, you made the choice to have the disease. Like, for me, I don't like calling it a disease because it's a crutch and people will use it as a crutch. And I hear it all the time and it infuriates the shit out of me. Now, and this is where I get to be a little bit of a prick. If you've never been there and you've never had the problem, you don't get to have an opinion. You shut your mouth.
Yep.
You don't.
That.
But for me, that's my view. The same thing with abortion. I have a dick. I don't have an opinion.
Right.
That's my view.
Yep.
Her body, her choice, bro. I might have knocked her up, and I, yeah, it'd be nice to have a say in it. And if she wants to have an abortion and I don't, I can't. That's where I go with that. That's a whole nother topic. I don't mean to like bust that open, but that's kind of my thing there. Is it a disease? It becomes one because you made a decision and you lost the ability to have the good time, or it got out of control. I mean, it left your grasp. You can't control it anymore, or you never could to begin with because you're genetically predisposed to having the problem.
Right.
Or predisposed to having the disease, quote unquote. That being said, when people pound that and they're like, well, I have a disease, and it becomes a pity party, that shit infuriates me. That's why I'm like, scientifically, is it a disease? Yes, it is. But you made a choice at some point, and that's how you got there. Right. So and that ruffles a lot of feathers, and I get it, but that's my opinion. It all starts with a choice. You made a decision to take that drink. You made a decision to smoke that shit, snort that shit, shoot that shit, whatever it is. It starts there with you, which is why I made, ain't got nothing to do with him. This is me versus me.
Yep.
And that's my view on it.
That's not too far.
As screwed up as it could be.
That's really not too far different, kind of, from what my personal views on it are. Because, like you, I'm a heftier man, and I replaced the coping with alcohol that I had back then to food now.
Yeah.
I will just buy food to eat sometimes. Like I'm not
Yep.
even
I'm
hungry
bored.
and I'm ordering Chinese food.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Addiction itself is a disease, but you were the one that said, I was the one that was like, I'm going to go out and get super drunk every night, every
Yeah.
weekend night
You
with
made
my
a
friends. You know what I
choice.
mean? Right.
You made a choice.
Yeah. And that's, and I think with it kind of branches out to other aspects of mental health to a degree that, I'm depressed. It's been diagnosed. It is what it is. But at least for me, I do use it from time to time to be like, oh, I don't work out enough because I'm super depressed and all I want to do is stay in the house. I'm still making that decision to stay in the house and not go work out. I'm making
Yes.
that decision to fund all these DoorDash drivers in the area and fund their kids through college rather than cooking a meal. And I put it on. I'm so tired from work that I just don't feel like cooking. But I have to take some accountability myself for that as well. So I think that there has to be a balance walk, and I think everybody's got to find their definition. Like for you and me, we know we are currently addicted to something, and addiction
Yeah.
runs in it runs in my family too. My mom's had issues with addiction. Obviously, my dad is an alcoholic, so he's had his issues with addiction. So, you know, is there a predisposition? I think there's a predisposition for every person out there to be addicted to something. It's
Something.
just some people choose to do it. Some people choose to be addicted to running and they're in really good
Yeah.
shape.
Yeah.
Some people are addicted to the gym and lifting weights, and they're in great shape because of it. Unfortunately, you and I have made the decisions to put poison in our body at one point, but knock on wood, we both beat that too. You know what I mean? Like it took me smashing a parked car with a car I'd made one payment on. Well, thank God nobody had been hurt. Like
Yeah.
I didn't get into a real accident because I know with the where my mind is, if that had happened, I probably would have tried to hurt myself a lot sooner because that's just who I am. Like the guilt would have been unbelievable for me. It was guilt. I was bad enough the fact that I got into a car and drove. Now, anybody that drinks in their 20s, almost anybody that says they didn't get it behind the wheel at some point and drive is a liar. And there were many nights for me where I made it home and was lucky, and yeah, I had this instance, it opened my eyes, and it was enough between the emotional trauma and then the head trauma from the accident for me to kick it. You know what I mean? Like I can go out and have a cider or a beer. I just choose not to because there is no enjoyment in it for me anymore. Like
Yeah.
that huge negative instance erased all enjoyment from that activity for me.
That crazy how that works.
It's amazing. And it's sad that you have to hit that like rock bottom
Yeah.
point.
Like
But
it takes this for me to pull my head out of my ass. Really?
exactly. Like like I couldn't have done this just like vomiting in the toilet at home. Like, oh, this is this is the worst. I need to fix this. No. Like that's light work for me. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was bad. So was there anybody that you did lean on though? I mean, I know you said that the AA thing wasn't really your style. Did you have somebody that you could like call or hang out with? Did you have something that helped you out in that regard? Oh, did I lose you? Oh,
No,
you're
I'm
back.
here.
Oh, it froze for a second on my end.
I I that first year, I refused it. Um, I didn't tell anybody that I quit until about the 6 month mark, 8 month mark. And I think I made a Facebook post about it. And I was like, I made it this far, and I'm done. I'm done. I was just like, And I remember one of my friends posting on there. He was like, stock markets, or I was like, I'm done drinking. That's right. The Jaeger King has retired, but and I kind of made a lighthearted joke about it. Right. And I'll never forget this comment on there. And it said, the stock markets are plunging, Jaeger stock will never be the same, things like that. Right. And I'm like,
right.
Jesus, like these people, these are my friends. And I'm like, I was kind of trying to be funny about it, but also serious. And I feel like everybody's kind of taking me as a little bit too much of a joke. You know what I mean?
Right.
The year mark, when I was a little over a year, that's when because I got on a mission because, Diamond Dallas Page, Scott Hall, and Jake the Snake Roberts is how that's where the inspiration to get sober came from. And that's really what started it and made me go, man, if these guys can turn it around and get in the Hall of Fame, and I was like, there's gotta be a way. There's gotta be a way. And I remember thinking that. I remember watching that Hall of Fame, dude, drinking and using drugs as I'm watching it, falling apart. Like, God, I wish I could do this. I remember it vividly. But that's why like our, Tony, like in his shows, that's why he throws that Scott Hall quote from his Hall of Fame speech, because that changed. I still have a hard time saying that without falling apart. Like I got it tattooed on me, and he threw that in there just because he knows like I'm gonna crumble, and I did. That when I made the decision, like I got to meet those three guys, and wherever I'm at in my journey, I will give them my coin. My sobriety coin that I've got at that time, tell them my story and thank them. And I met Jake first. And I gave him my coin, and me and him have been fucking dudes ever since.
That's awesome though that can connect people. You know what I mean? Like that's
bro, it's turned into this. It happens so organically. I'm this huge. For lack of a better words, fuck up. Sorry for language. And I meet, one of the biggest screw ups in the history of wrestling. And that's and I get sober. Then I thank the guy, and we become buddies. And then we start traveling together and doing shows. And now I have this whole other company booking Hall of Famers. I'm friends with all these guys. Like, happened because I'm an addict. What? Like, I never take it for granted. It's crazy.
Side note, everybody go on Facebook and check out the Norm Productions. Norm does a lot of work with promotions. Sorry, I stand corrected. Hey, you know what? It's going to be productions. We're going to get there someday. We're going to get there. We're going to be doing productions. Norm has the luxury career now of working with people that I used to watch growing up as far as professional wrestlers. It's phenomenal. I'm super jealous of him. In fact, next time I see Norm, I'm probably going to body slam him.
But all that happened organically. Like that's a dream, right? To like meet your childhood heroes that we grew up. I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. We all are.
Right.
And every time I'm doing it this weekend, bro. I'm going to hang out with freaking the Hardy Boys and the Godfather and freaking the Steiner brothers. Like, what? Jerry the King Lawler called me today. You coming this weekend? What? Like it's crazy, dude. I don't take it for granted. But when I met Dallas and Scott, God, I miss him. When I got sober, when I'd have a hard time, and those days would happen. I went through a lot in 2019. Like, man, I kind of lost my mind, to be honest with you. The tornado happened. I was madly in love with somebody in a relationship, and got my heart broke so bad. And then literally a month later, the tornado happens. I kind of lost my mind for a while. I went to the psych ward for a couple of days because I couldn't turn it off. I was just in shambles. I couldn't stop, and I was so scared that I was going to fall down. That's the closest I've ever been. I actually went to a bar, and middle at like noon, this little hole in the wall bar. Where like on a Friday night, you got like 4 people in there. Because I knew like nobody would really be there, and I didn't want anybody to see me. And I bought a beer and like big draft, like one of the big tall ones in glass. And I sat at a table for about 45, 50 minutes and watched this glass sweat and just cried. And I was like, you got to get out of here. Like, what are you doing? And I did. I left. And it wasn't long after that, I lost my dad. And that was just brutal. It was just like,
right.
Oh my God.
Like, how much more can I handle?
Yeah. I got through all of that and I didn't fall down. I talked to Jake a lot through that. Talked to Scott and Dallas a lot through that. And then when we lost Scott, man, that hurt. That devastated me because it was two sides to that. So, I lost Scott Hall, and Razor was my favorite wrestler as a little guy. But then I became friends with Scott Hall. So I lost my childhood hero and one of my friends. And one of the guys I credit with saving my life. That was brutal. I honestly didn't know it would impact me that bad. But it did, and it still does. You figure out a way, though, once you get, I'm like, man, if you can get by all that, and you don't fall down, and you don't use, and you don't medicate, and you use your support system that you eventually, I did put one in around me, my family, my close friends, fellow addicts. Then about the 3-year mark, that's when I realized I'm like, I will do whatever I can to save as many as I can. And that's when I became very open with my story because it's crazy, right? It's like a damn movie. I feel like I literally feel like my sobriety story is like a damn Lifetime movie. Like, you got this stupid kid who's got the world by the balls, becomes this local celebrity and radio jock, and he's awesome. Yeah, and everybody loves Norm. And I screwed up all of it. And I mean, throw it out the window for dope and booze. And then it's like, the Phoenix. And you come back. And how'd you get there? These WWE Hall of Famers who you're buddies with. Like, what? Wait, what? That's crazy. That just, I don't believe it when I say it, but it's true. I've had a couple people that are like, dude, you should like pitch that, like write a script. Like somebody needs to make this a movie. I'm like, well, that would be cool.
At the very least,
I don't know who you're going to get to play me, but yeah, it's man, and I really believe, and that's why that quote from Scott Hall is so heartbreaking and not heartbreaking, just it's so impactful to me. Because it's so true. It's hard work pays off. Dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do. It's the truth. It might suck right now, but it's not going to be like this forever. Right. And another one, and you're bad at this too, because we both do this. And I've been working really hard on this. Is self-deprecating humor.
No, it's 100%, and it was something that for me it started off. I don't know, and I don't know about you. Like for me, with it being like a thing when I was younger was, I was kind of picked on a little bit, and I figured out early on that if I beat a bully to the punch, it takes away their enjoyment. Right? They're like, oh, well, this is, because for me, my biggest one was, in high school, I was a football player, I was a wrestler, and I was in show choir. Now, 25 years ago, show choir was not as cool as it is now. Thanks, Glee. So, and obviously, amateur wrestling, you can guess the amount of things that I was called in a derogatory sense, because I don't like to repeat them. Basically any type of slanderous word towards a homosexual, that's what I was called. It was nothing but that. Like, oh, you touch guys, you roll in spandex, your jazz hands, all this stuff. So like I started just like embodying that and like running myself down before somebody could beat me to it. And then they, open their mouth like, oh, well, it's not fun for me anymore. And I'm like, I gotcha. And then that just snowballed now to where it's just like, it is a reflex action at this point where I'm just like, boom, let's make fun of myself because it's funny. Oh, it's killing me inside.
Yeah. I heard a quote that has helped me a ton with that. It's from Bruce Lee. And he said, don't speak negatively of yourself in any form or fashion because your body does not know the difference. Words are magic and cast spells. Why do you think they call it spelling?
I've heard that one too. That's a good one.
I was like, Bruce freaking Lee, bro. Let's go.
I actually had a therapist. I had sat down and talked, and we were talking about that because that's one of the things. I was very open with her about. Like she asked me about. I can't remember how we got onto it, but I said, I don't like taking compliments, and she's like, why? And I'm like, because I don't deserve them. And we got to the discussion about my self-image, and she's like, I want you to stop. Anytime you think about saying something negative about yourself, think about saying that to 9-year-old you. If 9-year-old you is in front of you, would you say that thing you're about to say to yourself? So if 9-year-old Joey Hall is in front of me, would I call him a fat piece of crap? Well, no, I wouldn't, because I don't want that kid to end up like me. And then I was like, oh, I see what you're saying, Doc. But it's not easy, it's a learned behavior, right? It's something we've trained ourselves to do.
It's hard.
And it is really hard.
Like the one that I use all the time is I say fat ass. And I just casually say, man, I'm trying to get my fat ass out of the chair. You know what I mean? Like, stop.
Right. Yeah. Well, and what in my instance too, and I don't know if this happens to you, but for me, it's led to like other people that'll say things like that think it's okay, and they don't understand how bad it'll hurt. Like somebody will make a fat joke to me, and it will instantly set me off. Like it will put me to the level of violence. Like because it's like it's one thing for me to call myself fat, but you don't call me fat. Like you don't have the right. You know what I mean? Like I'll knock you out. Not that I will, but I will. I'll get really angry. I'll get angry. But yeah, it's it becomes that thing where like it's okay for me to say it, but it's not okay for you to say it.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, words hurt.
Right.
It doesn't matter how old we are.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter how tough,
nobody wants to be hated. Yeah, right. Man. I mean, you can be. It's amazing that, we talk about me running around with all these WWE guys. It's amazing to me how many of these guys I've talked to that were bullied when they were kids.
Really?
I mean, dude, can you imagine? Think of this. The world's strongest man, Mark Henry. Can you imagine picking on that guy? Hell no.
But I'm not trying to get shoved into a locker.
Bro, and rolled up and then shoved in a locker.
Right.
Like a damn cast iron skillet.
Like fold my clothes with me wearing them and then shove me in a locker.
Like I literally had at my parents' house. I had Mark Henry over there for dinner. And So the Hall of Famers are coming to mom. So mom's got to get out the silver, the good china, right? So we get done eating, and Henry grabs one of mom's spoons, and he goes, "Can I have this?" And he said, yeah. He takes 2 towels, wraps it up, and twists it, and puts a perfect spiral up this silver spoon, and hands it to my mom, and then signs an autograph for her that says, "To Nova and Jim, I enjoyed spooning with you." Mom has that frame in the living room at the house now. But,
that's awesome.
I mean, that guy literally put a perfect spiral up a silver spoon, and that guy was bullied.
And that boggles your mind when
it's crazy.
Right. And it's like, and then
Yeah.
think about how much worse that is nowadays for kids. Because like when we were all kids, we didn't have social media. You know what I mean? Like I got bullied. I had a bully that we're actually kind of friends now. But like every day we would get off school property in middle school. Like I lived, I don't know, a quarter mile away. But as soon as you get off that property, he was there like shoving me on the ground, shoving me into a stop sign. Like one day it got to the point that I hid a knife under a neighbor's trash can. And I went by and picked it up. And I was like, if you shove me one more time, I am going to stab you. And then after that, he ended up getting released like 10 minutes after I did because the school found out and they were like, we're just going to separate him. But, kids do dumb things. We're all, but nowadays, kids can continue that harassment on your Instagram, on your Facebook, on your Snapchat, on TikTok, like on video games. It doesn't end for these kids. Like they have it so much worse than we did when it comes to the bullying aspect,
It's like the most public, coming from somebody who's like, I've experienced doing something bad, like in school, and like the school going, "Oh my God, did you hear what Lily did?" Like, and that drama and that BS and the stir the pot. I've also been dragged online on a world platform and had the world attack me. That's a whole different,
right?
Like, it's wow. And you're right, man. It's it's different than what third period is talking crap about Joe Hall,
right?
Versus would you get on Twitter today?
Yeah.
Like oh my God, man, it's insanity. It just I'm actually like grateful in that aspect that we didn't have that. Like we didn't have to grow up like with the technology that exists now. And
right.
that's just, man. It's scary to think about, man, what kind of craziness would be out there.
Right. Well, Norm, it has been a fun time.
Always is with you, bro.
I am I am so glad. I really am glad that you kind of took my podcast cherry, Virginia. I don't know if I can really say that, but you took you the first podcast for All Across the Country as I and we begin this 48 state, 48 capital, 13,000-mile walk for mental health. I knew I wanted to try to talk to you first because of your reach in this area. You know what I mean? Like you said, you're Norm, you're the famous radio jock that gets to hang out with professional wrestlers
Former.
now. But getting somebody like you and to tell your story, and I know you've done it for at least one other podcast so far, like that can give people hope. And that is one of the things that we're really trying to do with All Across the Country this time around.
Yeah, man.
Is I want to encourage people to open up and share because it's a huge step in trying to heal through things if you can talk about it. And even if it's just even if it's just me sitting with a person as I'm going on this walk and we just have an audio discussion. But like you don't know, you specifically, when we put this out there, that somebody in Nebraska could hear your story and be like, man, this guy overcame this. And now he's working with his childhood idols. But if he can get through all that stuff he went through, I can do it. and then that can snowball. And that's one of the things that we hope to do when we do these interviews as we go. And I mentioned it earlier when I was kind of doing the intro that I hope the podcast as they go get better, and like I get better at utilizing our platform and making it
You will.
look a little bit better. But
You will.
I am just I'm really grateful that you gave me the pleasure of having you on, because it is an honor to me. Even though you did sell me that death machine that I threw myself through an SUV window with. I love you like a brother, man. You're just like one. You're like right below Tony. You're right below Tony, though. We're related, so you gotta fall below Tony.
I totally get Tony represent, bro.
Right? I saw that. But as I'm getting ready to wrap this up, give me like a 1 or 2 sentences to help somebody else out there that might be going through the same thing that you went through or continue to go through, because we all know it is one day at a time.
It doesn't have to be this way. You matter. You're important. And you can get there. I promise you can. It's possible. You got to stay the course, and you got to want it and mean it. And I promise you can do this. Nobody wants to see you kill yourself and abuse what you're abusing or whatever it is you're doing. And I got no way out of this. I promise you there's a way. There's always a way. And if you're using and you're abusing alcohol and drugs, stop that shit. Go get help. Reach out. Send a message to me, somebody, anybody. Just reach out and get help. Don't be afraid to get help. We want you here. Nobody wants to see you. Nobody wants to do your freaking eulogy.
Right.
I'd much rather tell you in person how much I love you and how proud I am of you.
Or we'd rather roast you on a podcast at some point. But
yep.
But Norm, I appreciate it, man. And remember, everybody get out there and check out Facebook. Go on Facebook, The Norm Promotions. The Norm Promotions. Check out where Norm and all of your favorite WWE stars when you were growing up are going to be on any given weekend. And I hope you guys tune in. It's been a pleasure. I hope this wasn't terrible for everybody's ears. And we'll catch you next time.